The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, find out about a nonprofit group that's been helping local residents since the late 50s, the Assistance League of Tucson. Visit the 22nd annual Tucson Reptile and Amphibian show, where being cold-blooded makes you the center of attention. And Barbara Seyda talks about her newest work, Gaudy Sorrow, a book where she explores what it means to live with a broken heart. Those stories are all next on Arizona Spotlight. For 65 years, the Assistance League of Tucson has been helping people with vital needs, including books for young readers, clothing for school and work, and starting over supplies for unhoused residents who are making positive changes. Next, Tony Paniagua has an interview with two people involved who can talk about the importance of the Assistance League's programs.
Monique Van Sickle with the Assistance League of Tucson and Carolyn Gorst, the Community Engagement Director at Compass Affordable Housing. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Monique, I have driven by the Assistance League of Tucson's thrift store right there on Alvernon, north of Speedway Boulevard for many years. What is the organization all about?
The Assistance League of Tucson has been in Tucson since 1959. We started back then, a group of community women first got information about the National Assistance League. They then formed their own league called the Service League of Tucson, and thereafter changed the name. Our thrift store is operated by our member volunteer organization. We have over 330 volunteers who gave 52,000 hours of their time last year to work at the Assistance League. The money that comes in from the thrift store and from very generous donors and grantors goes to sponsor the 7 programs that we have at the Assistance League. We have been working with 140 schools, city and county agencies here in Tucson, and Operation School Bell provides brand new clothing or uniforms if the children go to schools with uniform needs. We supply brand new clothing for children in the Tucson area.
Carolyn Gorst, you are here because Compass Affordable Housing has benefited from the programs. But first, let's begin with learning a little bit more about your organization.
Absolutely. Compass Affordable Housing is dedicated to providing affordable housing for people living on lower incomes, low-wage earners, veterans, people with disabilities, and people who are recovering from homelessness.
And it's a very serious problem, because we were speaking ahead of this interview and you were giving us some amazing statistics. Can you please share that with the audience?
Over the last 10 years, homelessness in our beautiful city and county has increased by 500%. And since coming out of the pandemic, obviously COVID had its effects on a lot of people's ability to pay and stabilize in home. After the pandemic, we're still seeing an increase. And this isn't an easy one-size-fits-all solution. So we're going across the aisle, working together with other organizations.
How has Compass Affordable Housing benefited from the Assistance League of Tucson's assistance?
Greatly. So Compass has been linking arms with the Assistance League for many years now. We have the opportunity to give our residents and participants what's called a starting over supplies kit. So people who are moving out of homelessness into a stable home, they are able to get a kit that contains bedding, sheets, towels, a shower curtain, pots, pans, dishes. Imagine setting up house and not having any of those things. Thoughtful needs that people actually need to start building their home, building their house, building their lives, stabilizing their family.
And there are examples of people whose lives have been changed drastically. Can you share one of those with us, please?
Absolutely. One of the stories I love to share with people on why we link arms with the Assistance League of Tucson is we had a gentleman who had been homeless for 10 years come to Compass, and we got him stabilized in housing. His name was Leonard. For the first time in his life, he was able to have his own bedding, his own dishes, silverware to eat off of, pots and pans. When you're homeless, many of these things you don't get to keep because your items get stolen. As he stabilized and he got a job and he started working, he saved some money. We sent him shopping. He started furnishing his house. He got more than a bed. And we really encouraged him to start thinking about buying something for himself. And he found this beautiful china bowl that reminded him of a bowl his grandmother had when he was a child. And it was that connection from his past that filled his heart, and it became one of his most treasured possessions. Leonard went on. He is still working. He's bought a car. He's stable. He is a great story to show what happens when we all work together, but he still calls that bowl his precious possession. So that's because someone donated it to the Assistance League of Tucson.
And it seems like you're already addressing this topic, but what is it that gives you the most satisfaction about working at Compass Affordable Housing?
For me, it is wonderful to be able to work with other organizations to solve an issue that is becoming more and more, I call it a pandemic for our nation, to have people that don't have housing and the ability to provide for themselves and their family. I get a lot of joy out of knowing that we're working for the greater good of the people in our community, and that I get to work with great people like the Assistance League of Tucson.
And you, Monique, I'll ask you that question as well. You have a job to take care of the bills, but you are volunteering at the Assistance League of Tucson. Why do you do it? What are you getting out of it?
I volunteer in support of my community. I'm a near native of Tucson, and my city and my community are important to me. So the time that I have besides my full-time job, I give to the Assistance League of Tucson, and all the monies that we gain through the Assistance League stays in Tucson and directly helps the Tucson community.
Monique Van Sickle from the Assistance League of Tucson and Carolyn Gorse, the Community Engagement Director at Compass Affordable Housing. Thank you very much for joining us, and good luck to both of you and your organizations.
Thank you.
The Assistance League can always use more volunteers, grants, and donations. To learn more about the group or Compass Affordable Housing, you can find links on the Arizona Spotlight page at azpm.org. Earlier this month, an annual event brought together an estimated 10,000 people who love animals, but not the ones with fur or whiskers. Sophia Hammer was there, and she brought back this postcard.
The Tucson Reptile and Amphibian Show and Sale brought vendors from across the country that showcase and sell captive-bred reptiles and amphibians. Examples ranged from a massive alligator snapping turtle weighing more than 300 pounds to poison dart frogs the size of your thumbnail. There were also booths that offered specialized supplies, educational resources, and reptile-themed arts and crafts. I spoke to one of the participants who was standing in an enclosed area surrounded by dozens of glass terrariums containing venomous snakes.
I'm Russ Johnson. I'm the president and one of the founders of the Phoenix Herpetological Sanctuary. We're located in Scottsdale, Arizona, and what we're doing here at the Tucson Reptile Show, we're displaying over 50 different venomous snakes from around the world. We've got some other creatures that can be interacted with. We have a petting zoo going on so people can go in and pet the Galapagos tortoise and some snakes and things like this. And hopefully we're imparting a little bit of education because we're an educational zoo. And we've been working with Mark Wolfson at this show now probably 18 years. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so we've been with Mark a long time.
What are some of the venomous animals that we can see here at this year's show?
You're going to see a number of them. We have probably about 8 or 9 different species of cobras here, including the king cobra, that's Kong, and then everybody always likes the black mamba. The black mamba over there is called Cruella. Unfortunately, she makes Cruella de Vil look like the tooth fairy. That's how mean she is. But there's also the most venomous snake in the world, which is the inland taipan, is here from Australia. People think it's the black mamba or something else like that, and it's not. And you're going to see some that you're not going to see any of the zoos here in Arizona because they don't carry the anti-venom, and we do.
Can you just talk a little bit more about what the Phoenix Herpetological Society does?
If you come to our facility and do a tour, it's guided because we're trying to dispel a lot of myths, but also try to impart a lot of information because you don't get it in schools. And we have the largest crocodilian exhibit west of Florida. It's pretty impressive there. My biggest crocodile at the facility is 1,000 pounds, which is big enough to eat you, young lady. Okay, Sophia would be just a snack, yes. Okay? But anyhow, you're going to go into the venom room, which has about 250 venomous snakes from around the world. Then you're going to go into the barn, which is where the non-venomous are. And that's the part, if you feel like interacting with an animal, they'll bring animals out, and we're trying to get rid of some of the irrational fears and try to see if you want to be able to hold a snake or touch a snake, things like that. And then there's some lizards they can interact with. Then we have a large monitor exhibit. So there's monitors from Asia and different places like that, and they're fairly good size.
Do you get a lot of kids holding the animals in the...
We get a lot of kids want to do it, but the ones that don't want to do it, we don't force it on them. Usually what happens after they see the other kids doing it, it's peer pressure. And if a kid does it on their own, they'll never be afraid. But if a parent or somebody forces them to do it, they're going to be scared the rest of their life. And of course, the mom and dads want to take pictures of them holding a lizard or a snake. And it's kind of, I guess you'd call it a Christmas card experience, you know?
That's great. And Russ, what got you into this kind of work?
Well, I've been dealing with snakes since I was 4 years old, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am. But when I retired, my wife said I needed to get a hobby. And so 24 years ago, Dan, Debbie, and I started PHS. That's my hobby. As a matter of fact, I got to actually blame my first 2 rattlesnake bites on my wife because I told her, you're the one that told me to do this. So she's not buying it anymore, though.
Oh, my gosh. A rattlesnake bite, that's pretty intense.
The pain is, yeah. The pain is something. So I deal with the alligators and crocodiles because I can always get a prosthetic.
What is the most painful bite you've ever gotten?
Well, the rattlesnake bite was way more painful than the cobra bite, but again, I spent a lot of time unconscious with a cobra bite. I was on a ventilator and things like that, so I was in a coma for about 8 hours, but the anti-venom brought me out of it, and it did real well.
And is there any safety advice, especially out here in the Southwest and in the desert, that you would recommend to people?
Yeah, when you're hiking or whatever you're doing, don't put your hands or feet where you can't see. Stay on the trail. Snakes have no ears, so if you're chomping through the bush and you step on a bush, there's a rattlesnake, he's going to bite you. And then if you're climbing, don't put your hand on the far side of the rock that you can't see. If you do that, you can't get bit. If you see a snake and you decide to go over and play with it, you deserve to get bit.
Thank you so much, Russ.
Nice talking to you, Sophia.
I'm Sophia Hammer for Arizona Spotlight.
I'm shattered in a fast food plastic booth with 2 small pleated paper containers of ketchup, feeling my endangered heart, poached, breathing, slimy, furred, with a marsupial pouch and long tail. My heart, a mouth of serrated teeth, a tongue baked in an oven, a feral rat. Our umbilical cord runs through neon streets and upscale cravings, deadbeat casinos, faux swank hotels, and vibrating palm trees. Erotic asphyxiation and all-you-can-eat buffets. Cries. Longs to return home, to the flowering earth, to eat cabbage. I whisper to you and grieve the unknown.
That was Barbara Seyda, a Tucson-based author, playwright, and poet with a background in journalism. She was reading just one short letter from her newest book, Gaudy Sorrow. It's a heartfelt examination of grief and survival, sometimes funny, sometimes bleak. It never stops surprising the reader with technicolor language and atomic emotions. It's filled with tiny references to life in Tucson that only a local would understand. It was written in response to a tragedy that struck the entire world, but then zoned in on Barbara Seyda like a bullseye. In the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and after 20 years of being together, Seyda lost her best friend and lover, Jigo. After his passing, she wrote the letters that comprise the book, trying to navigate what it means to live with a broken heart.
My relationship with Jigor lasted almost 20 years. We were primarily friends through that time, but we were also lovers. And it was a very intense, beautiful relationship that I have no regrets about. It may seem highly dysfunctional relationship chaos and melodrama and shabby, and why would anyone write a book about it and then seek to get it published? I come from a working class Polish immigrant family, so I grew up with a strong sense of stoicism. We didn't grow up around gossip or trash talk or airing your dirty laundry. So just the act of writing this book was frightening for me. The level of vulnerability and exposure. But, at that time, I don't know if you remember 2020, but there were no vaccines. And Trump was still in office, and people were dying in mobile morgues and body bags. And, we were robbed of our birth and death rituals. Women were giving birth alone in delivery rooms. People were dying alone in hospice. You couldn't see your family. You couldn't hug anyone. It was a really horrific time. And so for me, I was terribly frightened. And writing became a refuge, but also just a sheer act of desperation. I think sometimes people assume that when writers write books, it's for they have some noble intention. But this was sheer desperation. I was so upset. I was so sad. I was so angry. So I bought several notebooks from Walgreens. I couldn't even write initially, and sometimes I feel like words are so hollow, so inadequate to express anything. So I couldn't write at first, and then I just started writing one sentence a day. And then I shaped those sentences into blunt letters, and the book is 216 letters to my dead friend.
You're clearly working through so many emotions, as you alluded to. The way sometimes you elevate him, you use the sweetest language, masterfully use the love languages. Other times, you're mad, you're bitter, you're insulting. And I think that is apart from my sheltered viewpoint, that is a part of the loss experience. You can't help but sometimes get mad that they left. But explain to our audience, just so they know, what was the manner of Zhigor's passing?
He was 45 years old. He had COVID. He was airlifted from Bisbee to Banner, and he didn't make it to the emergency room.
He also had a cancer condition.
He did, which he never discussed with me. He had brain cancer, and I know at some point he refused treatment. So there were other underlying health complications.
Barbara, do you think you were in some ways mythologizing things about the relationship, things about yourself, and things about Zhigor?
What do you mean by mythologizing?
Making larger than life. I just wonder how important it was to you, as you're trying to connect these missing pieces together, to also make it make sense. Were you looking for reasons why this relationship was such a volatile and important part of your life?
Partly, yes. I'm a former journalist. I'm a playwright and a screenwriter and now a poet. So I was swapping hats a lot while I was writing this. And Kimmy Eisel, who's one of my dear friends who wrote The Lightest Object in the Universe, she read the first rough draft. And she said, Barb, can you just please tell us how you met, walk us through the first 5 dates, take us through the next 19 years, and tell us how he died. So I put on my reportage hat, and I did that. I was also in my first poetry course at the University of Arizona in September of 2020. This queer trans poetry course was offered by the University of Arizona, taught by poet laureate T.C. Tolbert.
Yes.
That class was everything to me because I was separated and isolated from my family, from my friends. There was no source of comfort or relief, and that class was just so cathartic. And it was my first, I'm a late bloomer, Mark, so that was my first poetry class. And also, I will admit that I am attracted to dramatic situations and dramatic people and extreme glamour, and I'm fascinated by mechanisms of conflict and tension and shifting relationships of power and disempowerment. And so I try to keep that in my work. But sometimes it does seep into my personal life. I love actors, and I love artists, and I love musicians. And so Zhigor was, in many ways, he checked all the boxes. He was a healer. He was an actor. He was a dancer. He was a male model.
He was an axe thrower.
The Polish axe dance.
Yeah.
Do you know that dance?
Oh, I do it every morning.
They're hurling real axes and throwing them and swirling them. I mean, it's for anyone to actually master that dance. He could do the Polish axe dance.
But I mean, that's just one facet. How many letters again are in this book?
216.
And I bet I find out something new about Zhigor in 214 of them. Just constantly a new revelation,
that's beautiful.
A new door opening.
That's excellent because, at a certain point, Mark, if you just sit down and try to write about how sad you are every day, by day 3, it's incredibly boring. You're just in quicksand. You're in the undertow. And so, for better or for worse, I wanted to make the book entertaining. And whether that's cheap and tawdry of me, but I wanted it to be, I read the book now and sometimes I cry and sometimes I laugh, but I do hope that it's entertaining.
I got hungry a lot, and I had to look up many foreign dishes that I was not familiar with.
Really?
There's just so much food in the book, Barbara, and so many body parts.
I definitely wanted to disrupt the expectations of the traditional grief narrative, which uses maybe a circumscribed vocabulary. And I do feel like the body tells us stories, and so does food, and so do memories. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I wanted to create a new vernacular for sorrow. I wanted to create a new iconography with vibrant imagery. And I also wanted to explore the human heart as a theatrical space.
Do you want to discuss the presence of the COVID child and what it represented?
Well, at a certain point in writing, these interesting characters started showing up, like COVID Baby and Sophia Loren and Weird Cougar in a Bar and the cavalcade of underage global pandemic hookers. So I put on my playwright hat and my screenwriter hat, and I just allowed the characters to say and do whatever they want.
But was COVID Baby a representation of if your lives had taken a different path and you had had that sustained intimacy with each other that you mentioned several times you wished you'd had? Do you think that COVID Baby was your thought experiment into what might have happened had you and he settled down?
Wow, that's a fascinating interpretation. That's very symbolic and Jungian. I had no idea. I mean, just to be quite honest, my neighbor had a baby. And I prayed for that child. The whole time my neighbor was pregnant, I prayed because it was 2020. It was horrific. And I wanted my neighbor to be healthy, and I wanted the baby to be healthy. And so when the baby was born, and she was beautiful and she was healthy, and there is a letter saying that when we were in the garage and she was 3 months old, she gave me the finger. And her mother's apologizing, saying, well, she doesn't know what she's doing. She's only 3 months old. And
Sure.
Then I thought, well, what if all these COVID babies that are being born right now, what if they really know the miasma they're entering? What if they really know how disruptive and toxic and horrific the world is at this moment? And so she then took on her own character and she started to morph. And actually that was before the virus. We had variants of the virus. So it was really interesting because Kimi Eisel had said to me, what's COVID Baby doing? And I said, she's morphing into multiple lethal seductive virants. And so those were all her shape-shifting.
Yeah.
And
at one point you refer to COVID Baby as a super spreader.
Yes. And as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking maybe that COVID Baby is a metaphor for my own grief, because I often refer to grief as the volcanic shapeshifter. And just when you think you're healed up, and just when you think you've integrated and synthesized and you've been open to the loss and the disappointment and you're fine, you get smacked, and you're weeping. I actually love the character COVID Baby because she moves to Ohio at the end and then we don't hear from her again.
Well, I'm sure she's up to something.
But one thing I wanted to address, that writing a book is arduous and it's a gauntlet of obstacles. But then getting a book published, I submitted this book for 2 years to every major publisher and every independent press, and it was rejected. That's hundreds and hundreds of rejections. So there was a point at which I felt, okay, maybe this was an exercise in catharsis and self-knowledge, and that's it. And then I got an email from Leah Maines at Finishing Line Press, which is a tiny poetry press in Lexington, Kentucky, and they publish mostly all unknown poets. And I was thrilled.
And how can our listeners find it now?
It's available at Antigone Books, 411 4th Avenue locally, and it's also available through the publisher Finishing Line Press and Amazon.
That was author Barbara Seyda discussing her memoir, Gaudy Sorrow. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance from Sophia Hammer. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.